Hello and welcome to Choose a Fi. Today on the show, we have another Households of Fi update. So we have Kristi back on the show. And Kristi is a single mom from Minnesota with a daughter in middle school. Last we spoke with her, she had just graduated with an MBA and she works in marketing. She had found Fi and it seemed to me like she was just absolutely rocking it. She had a plan to get to Fi in 10 years, a 50% savings rate. And then she had the next level questions, right? To think about, okay, second generation Fi. How do I set my daughter up for all of the ground game, as we say, right? How can we teach our kids to be ready to succeed wildly with their finances? And how do you think about college? She thought about, I was drifting through life without intentionality, but now I can have the time to really dial in on these things. So this was all going on in the background. And this is a very typical Fi story. And I think it's just really illustrative of the journey of Fi. And I'm just super excited to catch up with Kristi. And that again was where she was in 2020 and 2021. And I'm curious to see where she is now. So with that, welcome to Choose a Fi.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Kristi, welcome back to Choose a Fi. I'm so happy you're here, and I'm happy to meet you face to face.
Yes, it's nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, this is wonderful. And this is the first time that we're meeting. I feel like I know you, obviously, because I listened to, you were on 3 different episodes. So just to catch the audience up, these Households of Fi episodes are really like, I have this hoity-toity longitudinal studies. It's this ridiculous thing. But, that's kind of my joking way of looking at it. But like, essentially, we came up with this idea to follow different people, different families on their path to Fi, essentially when they were finding Fi. So this was 2019, early 2020, and we selected 8 different households to follow. And we introduced them in episodes 221 and 224, which is where Kristi was introduced. And then either Jonathan or I spoke with these households going forward, or we connected them with real subject matter experts. And Kristi, you kind of hit the jackpot with some amazing guests and guest hosts. Basically, you had Big Earn chat with you in episode 259, and then Brian Feraldi in episode 314. So some real heavyweights. And those are just phenomenal episodes to listen to, even for me as just like a listener of Choose a Fi. And it was pretty wild to learn about the employee stock purchase program, and then to hear Brian talk about individual stock investing and price to earnings ratio and things to think about. So, definitely wanted to catch people up on where they could go back and listen to your story. But now we're here, right? So it's been about a year and a half since we caught up with you. And so I gave an intro, and I wonder how much of that is outdated at this point.
Yes, I would say that pretty much everything in the intro is at least somewhat outdated. So I'm excited to give everyone an update on some of those things. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, well, start us off, because I don't know, from every single thing, I don't know where to start.
Yes. So like you mentioned, I had recently graduated with my MBA. So I was doing engineering prior to that. So I switched over to marketing. So that was ongoing for maybe a year or so. And then not too long after we spoke, I started kind of using some of the advice that I got from the Choose FI podcast in terms of putting myself out there and kind of practicing talking to recruiters. That was one of the things I wanted to do to push myself forward and start investigating what else was out there in terms of jobs. So I started just lining up kind of introductory calls with recruiters just to practice those conversations. And that ended up, of course, leading me to a new job.
Oh, wow.
So that's the first change, is a new job. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Goodness. That's super cool. Well, congrats first off. I definitely want to hear all the details. But so practice talking to recruiters. That's not like something that somebody generally does just like for no no reason. I'm curious, like, were there particular episodes of Choosify that spurred you on, or was it just kind of like a general ethos? Or talk me through that.
Yes, there were specific episodes. I don't know them off the top of my head, but there was an episode where somebody had that as kind of a tip and a best practice to keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on in your career world and things like that. And so that was one thing I know, interviews in particular, job interviews are not something I look forward to or enjoy at all. And so I kind of took that on as a challenge for myself and a way to, improve 1% better every day kind of a thing. And it worked out pretty well. I was, gave me the confidence I needed when I was ready to take a job search a little more seriously.
Wow, that's really incredible. I love that. So I think to me, I'm with you. That is not something that's comfortable at all in terms of, I guess, just interviewing or certainly like negotiating your salary or anything like that. And I mean, I think there's a takeaway just there, which is leaning into discomfort, right? Like
Definitely.
So often we run the other way from discomfort, but there's very little growth in that. And there is growth in finding those spots that like, oh, that makes me, my palms a little sweaty. Maybe I should lean into that.
Yep, absolutely. And that's kind of something that I value in my life. And something that the podcast has really helped instill in me is always taking action and trying to just do a small thing to improve and to move forward. And so I agree that's a big part of it, is kind of pushing yourself into those uncomfortable situations and then you get better at it. So yeah, that was a powerful thing. It worked out for me. I definitely feel like I would do it again, if I'm in the situation of approaching a job search again, which we can talk about. But I would do the same thing again, kind of practicing and taking the little steps to get towards the goal.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to talk about the job search for sure. But in terms of practice, so like you said, the 1% better, were there things that maybe you were not as good at the beginning, let's say, and I don't know, beginning, middle, end, or whatever, like, were there tips that you picked up, I guess, let's say, that you could pass along to the audience of like, oh, this was something that I just was totally unaware of, or was something that I could have improved on, or low-hanging fruit that just like jumps out to you as like, oh man, I wish I had known that on day one of this?
I think a few things. It really helps you refine your elevator pitch for sure. It helps you think through what it is you're looking for. When recruiters are asking you questions about why are you looking, how serious are you right now, it makes you kind of reflect and think more deeply about what exactly it is you're looking for, so you can be more intentional about that. Certainly the salary topic and negotiating and things like that, it helped me kind of figure out what was a reasonable number, what was kind of the expected number for my level of experience. So it definitely helped me pin down what I thought was reasonable, what was a good stretch to reach for. So that part of it was good too.
That's very cool. So, right, how serious were you? That's an interesting question to be asked when, especially like at first, you were doing this mostly to kind of lean into discomfort. But of course, you wouldn't be doing it if you were 100% happy at your existing job and there was no chance you're not going to waste your time or people's times or potentially burn bridges. So like, how serious were you at the beginning? Like, was this, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to move jobs, or was it truly just, hey, let's see what's out there?
I think where I was at is I had been in my same company for a handful of years. And then the role that I was in, I had switched to marketing for a couple of years or a year or two. And I was starting to think, okay, I've been at this company for a long time. Maybe I should at least investigate kind of what else is out there. I don't want to get too stuck or comfortable, I guess, being at the same company. And I could have easily stayed at that company for my whole career. A lot of people, it's a big, huge corporation. So a lot of people did stay there their whole careers. And I knew that the window, maybe in terms of like a mental barrier, was closing for me to either take the leap or commit to, it being a lot harder to take the leap, however many more years down the road. So I was kind of starting to toy with the idea. And this was kind of my first step, I guess, in that direction.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. So you take these first couple of steps, and then what made it apparent to you that, okay, a move is going to benefit me in whatever way you define benefit, right? Because like, I think we all reflexively mean or think that means by definition, I'm getting more salary. And you might and probably did get a higher salary, but there are so many potential benefits. And I think one of the hallmarks of the FI community is that we think a little bit differently. And we understand there are many potential benefits from moving jobs. So this is more just broadly for the audience. But I'm curious, like, what were those benefits that jumped out to you? And it may just be open and shut, the salary, but talk me through what you saw out there, I guess.
Yeah, so I think what gave me kind of the final push where a new job was imminent was, during the pandemic, a lot was going on, and I kind of realized that the company that I was at was not aligning to my values and my principles, and that was really the final push to make a move. And then, of course, as the opportunity presented itself with a different recruiter reaching out and a lot of recruiters, I think I'm speaking about recruiters that I encountered on LinkedIn. You'll mark yourself as open to hiring or looking for a job, that recruiters can see that and get a lot of recruiters coming your way. And some of them, it's very much transactional, they're trying to fill a position. But the recruiter that I ended up working with, I could tell, I did a little research on her LinkedIn and I could tell it was a different caliber of recruiter. And I wanted to make a very good impression on her and I was taking it a little more seriously. And of course, with that, that's the one that ended up working out. So it's kind of a combination of factors.
Okay. No, I love that. And yeah, I think LinkedIn is definitely like a blind spot for me. I know we've had a couple of guests talk about LinkedIn. So I'm not 100% sure that this is the episode you're referring to, but it quite possibly could be. Way back in episode 23, we had ESI on the show, and it was the episode title was Career Hacking with ESI Money. And I know he talked about LinkedIn and building your network and such. And I think it was him who talked about, I guess, building this network of recruiters who you actually touch base with. You think of recruiters as, oh, they just kind of send you an email once a year, but you can actually keep those relationships up from your end, which is interesting. Again, it's so silly that I would never have thought of that, but you don't think of these things sometimes until you hear it and it just smacks you in the face that, oh, that's really interesting, especially in your case where I guess this was an elite level recruiter as you're describing. And okay, this is probably somebody that it's in my best interest. Even if you love your new job, it's probably in your best interest to keep in touch with them, just generally speaking.
Yep, absolutely. That's something that, I've wanted to do is keep in touch with her specifically. And after working with her, I was like, if I'm ever looking for a job, that is who I'm reaching out to. Certainly not exclusively, you got to kind of get out there and see who else can help you out. But she was really great to work with. So it was a really good eye-opening experience in terms of working with a recruiter.
No, that's great. So since you did just go through this, and we're all about actionable steps, are there things that people, again, just like one or two little things that you would pass along either in terms of LinkedIn or working with a recruiter, but maybe specifically with LinkedIn? I think that's probably like a broader thing that like, okay, I didn't know this 2 months before I started working on LinkedIn to try to build these relationships, but I know them now that could like help shortcut somebody else's path to this.
Let's see. Well, certainly using the functionality that's available, how you can kind of make your settings show that you're open to being reached out to by recruiters. So that's
Nice.
the biggest
That's
one, because then they kind of just pop up in your inbox if they have opportunities that your profile seems to fit in with. So that's good. And then another little thing I did when I talked with recruiters, each recruiter, I would send them my resume, or oftentimes they would request a resume just kind of as part of their spiel. But I would always ask them when we talked on the phone if they had any feedback on my resume or my LinkedIn profile. And my LinkedIn profile is by no means perfect right now, but it was just a kind of a best practice for me to get their feedback on how I was comparing with other potential candidates that they were looking at.
Huh. What a cool question. And did they give you honest feedback, or what seemingly was honest feedback?
Well, they were pretty positive just about my resume. And I mean, I think I had done a lot of work on it previously, just in terms of making everything kind of quantified and based on the impact of the work you've done. So always linking, something to what was the impact and how can you quantify it?
That is a great takeaway. So the impact and how do you quantify it? That in and of itself, Kristy, that's gold. Okay, so we got LinkedIn and then you met with this recruiter and then it comes time, okay, it's interviews and potential job offers, salary negotiation, anything jumped out that was interesting there?
I definitely went back and was searching on Choose F5 for, negotiating and salary and reviewing some of the things that I know I'd listened to previously to prepare myself for the negotiating part, because it's a big deal. It's nerve-wracking. And I honestly just didn't have any experience. It's very different, I think, negotiating for a new role within a company that you've already been working at. They have access to all of your salary information. So it's a kind of a different ball game than negotiating at a new company where, it's kind of up to you how you position it and what you ask for and everything. And working with this recruiter, she did a really good job supporting me in that. It was kind of a unique situation, I think, because when she first reached out to me, it was for a specific position. And when we talked salary, it turned out that I was looking to be higher than this position would allow for. And so she actually went back to the company to see if there was anything else that they had that would be more aligned with my background and the salary that I was kind of looking for. And so because of that, I ended up being the only candidate that she had for that particular position. So it was really a win-win for me and for her. We both wanted the best. We both wanted to make the deal at the best, possible salary. So she was really on my side, which maybe isn't always the case for a company hiring a recruiter to bring them candidates. So it was kind of potentially a unique situation. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, that's super cool. It's amazing, right? When incentives align like that, right? Like,
Exactly.
when they line up, it's to everybody's benefit there. That's great. And yeah, just to really quickly mention the episodes that we have on salary negotiation, I think they're probably two of our most popular episodes out of nearly 600. So episode 147 with Tori Dunlap, and then episode 211 with the financial mechanic. And they both give like very specific negotiating tips and even like scripts of like what to talk about, what to ask for specifically. So I suspect very strongly you went back to those two or at least one of them. And like from what I've heard, and again, I haven't personally done this, but it's staggering how well it works. And I mean, we've had so many success stories of people getting $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 more than they would have otherwise just by using these scripts, which is, I mean, talk about, again, just like a crowdsourced personal finance show. Like that is amazing to me. So yeah, I guess just real quick on the end. So how did the salary ultimately wind up as compared to where you were?
Yeah, it worked out really well. I had, a full spreadsheet of something that was important to me is leaving a very large company for a much smaller company. I knew that the benefits were not going to be on par. And so I took the time to really lay out like what the differences were in terms of dollar value. So I tried to put a dollar value on each benefit that would be decreasing and then make sure that I built that into my ask for salary along with, what a promotion. So making sure that I felt good about it and then, that it made sense. And that obviously helped me a lot in terms of going into the negotiation, feeling comfortable and like I had justification for what I was asking for.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important that, I mean, you did that perfectly. That's brilliant. And I was just speaking with somebody recently, a friend of mine who was talking about doing it wrong, literally like 180 degrees from how you did it, which was just, oh, wow, that one number, the salary number was just so attractive. And they just kind of like leaped at it. And then they realized after the fact, oh, wow, I used to get my health insurance and it was nearly free. And now I have to pay $1,000 a month. Like that's a legitimate thing that bites into any quote unquote salary increase. And like you can just go down the line of all those benefits. And just like we were talking about before, there are lots of things that you could potentially value in a new job or new job environment. It's the same on this compensation, which seems like it should be black and white, open and shut, but it is hardly the case. There's so many factors to take into account.
Yep, I agree. So laying that out was definitely helpful. And when the HR person at my new company reached out, responding to my initial number to the recruiter, she definitely was like, that's going to be a stretch. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to meet that. And then, when you come back with the justification, they ended up meeting that number. So I think that was kind of another important learning.
Yeah, good for you, Kristy. That's really awesome. Okay. So, right, you've been in this new job for how long? About somewhere in the vicinity of a year?
Yep, about a year.
Nice. I think we've covered that wonderfully. But in the intro, essentially everything was wrong. So tell me what else is going on that in terms of updates.
Yeah. So with the new job, I thought it was important to try out a smaller company. That was an experience that I wanted to make sure I tried. And with that, a lot of things that Choose FI talks about are definitely coming to the forefront in terms of, being happy and aligning your career with your principles and your values and things like that. So I'm not kind of settling in the corporate career ladder. I'm still not satisfied with that. And something that's always been kind of in the back of my mind is somehow trying to do something entrepreneurial. So I've been trying to take steps somehow towards making that happen. There hasn't been too much solid progress, but certainly a lot of thoughts around that. So that's another thing I'm trying to kind of be intentional about. I've listened to a few of the Rebel Entrepreneur podcast episodes, just trying to start dipping my toe in the water there. So that's something that's been top of mind, kind of nagging at me for a while.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I mean, I think that kind of describes my life for the last 15 years too. It was like this kind of nagging itch of, oh, maybe there's something out there. And I know for me, it was just like, and it sounds like it was for you or is for you. It was just like this exploratory journey. And that's a neat thing about this day and age is you really can explore and learn skills and pick up new things for essentially free or pretty darn close, which is wild. And then I think it sounds like you're doing it the same way that I did, which is the opposite of the burn the boats scenario, which is like, come hell or high water, I'm doing this, and forget the 9-to-5 job and the nice salary. It's all gone. I'm going to make it. And I think for me, it was just, okay, I'm going to pick up skills. I'm going to try. And if I quote unquote fail, oh, well, I still have my day job and I'm still saving a lot of money and all's well. And do you have any inkling of like, is this just still in like the super formative stages, or do you have like any sense of like what an entrepreneurial journey might look like?
I really don't. It's in the very early stages. I've just been thinking and trying to figure out what my passions are. Anything that I move forward with, I want it to be very aligned with my interests, because I don't want to get into a situation where I'm trading one job that I'm mediocrely interested in for another, so that's kind of the biggest thing for me, is finding something that would be sustainable and motivating for me in terms of my passions and interests. So I've just been trying to kind of think really intentionally about what my interests are and document them and look at other people's examples of how they kind of took the leap, and more so working to get there in my mind of what the possibilities are.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. So I think very clearly, if you'd be up for it, hooking you up with Alan Donegan would be a perfect person for a future one of these episodes, which would just be fun. It's like, again, that brainstorming session or an exploration. I think that would be great for you, for the audience. And Alan is just like, as you know, a ball of energy, and he's just amazing. And actually, Alan and Katie are coming on the show for a totally different thing. So this episode's coming out in November, and it looks like early December, we're going to have an episode with Alan and Katie Donegan, which is cool. I did want to mention they have a free course that actually, Kristy, you might want to sign up for this. So just go to alandonegan.com, and they're offering this like free extraordinary life course. And it's a 5-week thing with like a bunch of live sessions. So that might be worth your while. I think it's more just generally like building an extraordinary life, but I suspect there's going to be some entrepreneurial stuff built in there. So as you well know, Alan is a huge friend of the Choose FI community. So that might be neat. So to be continued on you and Alan and the entrepreneurial lifestyle. So we're ticking down the list here of what is new in Kristy's life. I suspect it does not end there.
Yes. Well, something that's very new is I actually recently got engaged.
Ooh.
So plenty of financial implications there.
Wow.
All the way, starting at planning a wedding. And, when we talk about like aligning our values and only spending money on what we value, which is really important to me and something I try to live by. Planning a wedding is a struggle. So, and I've literally, it was just like a week ago. So it's very new, but I've always been thinking about that, and we've talked about that, about how are we ever going to do this in a way that we're happy with, where we're not spending tons and tons of money on a wedding. So if any listeners out there have tips on how to plan a wedding on a budget, I would love that.
Yeah, that is okay. Well, first off, huge congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
incredible. That's fantastic. I definitely want to talk both about money with your fiance and this wedding. But to your point, if anybody does have suggestions, I guess the easiest way would be to send me an email. So actually just go to chooseavi.com/subscribe and you can get on our email newsletter. I handwrite and send out an email every Tuesday. And literally it's the 5-weekly newsletter. Just hit reply to that. It comes directly to me. So just say, hey, pass this along to Kristi, and I'll literally just copy and paste the thing. So that would be amazing. And that goes for any of our guests. Just get on that newsletter, send me an email, and I can facilitate the communication. So I suspect, Kristi, that you might get a deluge of emails, which won't be such a bad thing.
No, that would be amazing. Yes. Any help would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I listen to a lot of podcasts. The Tim Ferriss Show has always been my favorite by far, but for the first time ever, there's a real rival for that top spot. It's a show called My First Million. When I see a new episode show up in my podcast player, it's a drop everything and listen kind of situation for me. The show is all about business building and growth hacking, from how to make $1,000 in a weekend type side hustles to billion-dollar ideas and everything in between. The show is fun. It's infectious. The hosts, Sam Parr and Sean Perry, have an amazing rapport. In fact, if you're a longtime Choose a Vi fan, I think you'll find it's the closest thing to me and Jonathan you've ever heard. And Sam and Sean are legit. They've built and sold 8-figure businesses to HubSpot and Amazon, and they have an amazing network of friends and colleagues they get on the show to share their wisdom. If I lost everything and had to start over from scratch, I can honestly say the first place I'd start is with My First Million. I think the mindset of business building they cultivate is unmatched, so I'd seriously just listen to every episode in their feed and go from there. The show is a little bit of an acquired taste, but as you get to know Sam and Sean, you'll see just how brilliant they are. So take my word for it and listen to at least a handful of episodes. I think you'll love it. So search for My First Million. That's My First Million on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, so your fiance, are you on the same page financially? Like, talk me through like how important that is.
Yes. So we definitely are on the same page, which is, part of why we worked out, I suppose, finances and being financially savvy, and really more importantly, being on the same page with what we value in terms of what we would spend money on. We're very aligned in that. I talked about in kind of my introductory episode, having a real mindset shift around being kind of keeping up with the Joneses and being very motivated by money in my career and always wanting to climb the ladder and, have a bigger house and all of that. That was me in a way for sure. And when I found Choose FI, that's really what gave me a real mindset shift. And it made me realize, oh, this is what I feel much more comfortable with and aligned with. There was always that conflict in trying to keep up with the Joneses where I knew deep down like that was not fulfilling for me. And why am I doing this? So yes, my fiance and I are very much aligned on that aspect, which is amazing. It really comes out in so many different parts of life. So I think it's an important thing to be similar on with your partner.
Yeah, no, it is exceedingly important. And I'm curious, have you had overt conversations about money and or like the FI philosophy, or is it just kind of like in the background you could tell that you're aligned?
We've definitely had a lot of conversations about, it comes up in daily life, just different things that you would spend money on, and it becomes very obvious. And so I think that was attractive for both of us. Like, wow, somebody that I completely agree with in terms of what I value and what I would spend money on, because there are certain things you would spend a lot of money on if you value them. So it's just making sure you're aligned on what those types of things are, I think.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah, we just had Katie Gaddy on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. She has a podcast called Money with Katie. And I think actually she recently got married. So she might have some tips, actually. I'll see if I can find anything in her back catalog. But we talked a little bit about combining finances. And, that's something that like that conversation sometimes is fraught with peril, especially like if you're getting married once you've established a financial life and you have either significant net worth or maybe a disparity in net worth sometimes. And it's one of those things that may be hard to talk about. And I don't know, it may be hard for you to talk about A, on the podcast, but B, just like with your fiance. Like, is that something that you've crossed that bridge already? Or is it just, we'll see what happens as it gets closer? Or talk me through that.
Yeah, I think it's really complicated, especially because I was a single mom. So I have a child. So that's kind of one thing that's interesting, combining finances when we're two people and he's one person is complicated. And then in terms of like our income, one thing that I really appreciated about my fiance when we first met is that he has a career that is very much aligned with his passions and interests. And so, his whole life is very much aligned, which I think is just an incredible feat to have achieved. And then I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I, have the corporate career, I make pretty good money. And, so there is a kind of a difference there in that. And so how we combine finances going forward, I'm not exactly sure what that will look like. It's definitely a complicated situation, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think it sounds like, obviously, you guys are aligned on the important stuff and on generally, money generally, the same life outlook. So I think just like anything, not that I'm giving you advice or you're looking for advice from me by any means, but is communication just is the trump card, right? Like that's what facilitates everything. So I suspect you're going to come to a nice resolution. And again, just like in life and in FI, there's no right answer. There's no perfect answer. There's no like by the book answer. It's all right. We figured out what worked the best for us. And I think you can only get there by having those conversations. Sometimes even if they are a little weird or a little awkward, but this is obviously your life partner, right? So, it's one of those important things. So yeah, again, really congrats. That's super, super cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Wow. So everything has changed, but I'm assuming, so it sounds like your salary has increased. So have your expenses increased like dramatically since we last talked? Or is it just, okay, now my savings rate is more significant than it was?
Yeah, I mean, I still track my expenses very closely. I'm kind of one of those nerds that just, a spreadsheet nerd, and I love tracking things. And so I wouldn't say my expenses have increased, any significant way other than inflation. So I've just been trying to save as much as I can. So I did increase my savings and tried to kind of just pack all that extra income into more savings. And I think now approaching, a wedding and hopefully in the future, we would probably need to scale up in our house for more kids and all of that. So I'm now at the point where I'm thinking, okay, I need some liquid cash and trying to figure out what the best approach is for that. So that's kind of the next big challenge.
Oh, interesting. Right. So obviously liquid cash for wedding in whatever regard that takes. And then right, potential down payment. And I know as we talked about, or you talked about with Karsten and Brian, obviously you had a significant savings rate, but it sounds like you were trying to max out 401ks and IRAs and the ESPP. So a lot of that is, quote unquote, locked up, right? So it's like it's under these umbrellas of retirement. And of course, we know there are ways to access some of the money, though that's usually not preferable, certainly just for like an elective thing by any means. So now you're talking about, okay, maybe it's time to rethink where some of the savings goes to maybe increase my like quote unquote taxable savings accounts. And that's such a terrible phrase, the taxable savings. But for people out there who haven't heard, or we're still like scrambling for a better way to describe this, but it's just your normal savings, right? So like what goes in your bank account and then you send to some type of savings vehicle, whether that's literally like an online savings bank or I don't know, your brokerage account at Vanguard or Schwab or Fidelity or wherever, or some type of real estate investment, et cetera. I guess that's like your taxable savings, but you're talking about, okay, maybe I need this more liquid than otherwise. So do I really want to lock this up? Do I want to put it in a real estate investment and I can't access it? There are definitely a lot of considerations. So my first question is like, I'm going through the math in my head and saying like, okay, you have a nice income, obviously, and you had a significant savings rate. And it sounds like that might be even potentially higher than last time we spoke. Are you still prioritizing maxing out those retirement vehicles? Or is it like, okay, I'm going to get my company match if you have one at the smaller company and then really prioritize the taxable savings? Like, talk me through how that has evolved.
Yeah, so I'm still maxing out my 401k, still maxing out an IRA. My new company doesn't have an HSA, which I was maxing out. So I just increased, automatic payments into my brokerage account and would invest that immediately. So that is probably the first place that I would look to maybe not invest that cash right away, even though it's so painful because now is a great time to be investing in the stock market. So that's been a challenge to think through what's kind of the most optimal way to go about it. I also, put into my daughter's 529 plan. So I'm not exactly sure. I'll definitely start with maybe reducing investing in my brokerage account and just kind of keeping that more liquid rather than investing it. That's probably where I'll start. I would really hate to not max out, my 401k or my Roth IRA. So we'll see how we can work that. Yeah. Or maybe, I have the end of the year bonus, and that might just kind of be something that I don't invest or put away in savings.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. It depends, I guess, on the timeline of things also, right? Of like, hey, if we're going to buy a new house in 5 years, well, that's an altogether different situation than if we're going to buy a house 6 or 12 months from now, right? So like in terms of like investing timeline, I think it's hard to know volatility wise, 6 to 12 months. And I mean, it's hard to know in any timeline, obviously, but the longer timeline, the higher likelihood it is that there will be positive returns in the stock market. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you in that, like, if I were buying a house in 6, 12, 18 months, I'd probably be pretty hesitant to necessarily put it in the stock market, especially now that like there are some like bonds and different savings accounts that have like pretty nice yields. Like I've seen 3 to 5% or certainly 3 to 4% pretty easily. And that's not nothing, right? Especially since we've been through a period of time where it's essentially been nothing. So that's something to think through. But right, if it were 3, 5+ years, well, that's an altogether different thing. And I love your spreadsheet geekery, as you put it. And what you said in there in passing sounds obvious to you because you've internalized this whole concept, but it's not obvious to most people. It's like, now is a great time to invest. And like, think about how profound that is, that you've internalized that, Kristy, right? Because like most people see, oh, the market has gone down X%, 30% or whatever it is year to date. And it seems like every day there's bad news or something terrible coming. Most people run for the hills then. But you're saying, oh, wow, I can get stocks at a 30+% discount.
Yes, exactly. That's definitely a big learning from the whole financial community in general is, hanging on, not paying too much attention to my 401k, trying not to look at it and just, hang out for the long haul. And yeah, if there's extra cash, throw it into the market and try to buy those stocks at a discount is definitely the approach for me.
Yeah, that's great. And I love trying not to look at it, trying being the operative word, right? It's hard. Yeah, I think to your point, we need to get our brains out of investing as much as possible because we just screw everything up when we try to like time things or think that we're smarter than the market. And I mean, I know I am very, very guilty of this from time to time. And yeah, the less you look, it seems like the much higher likelihood of success over the long term. So yeah, that's great advice just in and of itself. I think if people were going to take away one thing from this episode, it would be that. Like, please don't look, don't mess with it. Just like keep putting money in week after week, month after month. It is a very high probability of success. But it's funny, right? The buying stocks at a discount, it's like the one thing that we like psychologically like don't want to buy at a discount is what most people think. But yet it's really a pretty marvelous thing if you're getting that same little ownership piece of that company, because that's what it is for a discount. I mean, that's pretty hard to pass up. So I know you mentioned in there your daughter and 529, and you mentioned in an earlier episode about second generation FI. You had some kind of second generation fire domination, which I loved. That was so fantastic that very much spoke to me. So your daughter's in middle school, getting close, if not right at the teenage years. And my older daughter is right about the same age as yours. So it's interesting, in terms of, okay, what do we do to set them up? How do we teach them lessons without being overbearing? How can we use our smart financial habits to maybe help them? I actually just opened up an authorized user credit card for both of my daughters. which I don't think I've mentioned here on the podcast yet, but I have my Chase Sapphire Preferred as my longest standing account. I probably will have that open forever. And I added them as authorized users. So, it does positively impact and establishes really a credit score and a credit history for them. And it doesn't cost me anything to have those authorized user cards. And, frankly, like if my daughter, she's now into amusement parks. So like, when she goes to King's Dominion or Busch Gardens here in Virginia, I'm able to like literally give her her own credit card. It's pretty cool because they don't accept cash actually anymore, which is funny, Kristy. But so that's one thing that I've been doing. But I'm curious, like, what have you been doing with your daughter at this early stage? Because it's still early for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I love that idea, and I will likely do that as well because she's at the age where, they have their own social lives and things cost money, and I'm, handing over my credit card for her to take to wherever so she can get into the football game or whatever it might be. So I think that's a really good idea. I certainly have not reached second generation fire domination by any means. I think that my daughter is at that age where, she has her own thoughts and mom is kind of annoying half the time. And she has, even made funny comments about, Mom, you already taught me all of these lessons about saving and everything. Can't you just loosen up now and let me spend money on this or that, which was kind of funny. But one principle I try to live by with her is, like, I want her to have that accountability for her own money. So she has her own money, that she's gotten from whatever birthdays and things like that. And I will, maybe make comments about things that I would or wouldn't spend money on. But I always say, hey, it's your choice. This is your money. You can spend it how you want. So I want her to kind of feel that accountability or experience buyer's remorse if that's ever a thing and things like that. So I don't restrict her from buying certain things. I let her spend her money how she wants. And then another thing is I tend to, if it's something that I think is just a normal expense, I'll pay for it for her. But if it's something that's kind of frivolous or, I don't think she has to have, then I say, well, you can use your own money if you want to buy that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a couple of things that I do with her.
That's great. I like that. And we do something very, very similar, right? Like clearly, like, I shouldn't say clearly because every family does it differently. But the necessities we certainly pay for and then some. But the things that are clearly like their choices to buy or something that's like purely, frivolous is, it could be that word, but also just like something they just genuinely want. And it may or may not be frivolous. Like that in our family comes out of their spending pot. So we have these kind of like we give them allowance every week and we don't like personally tie it to chores or anything. It's just kind of like the money they get to learn how to handle money, more or less. And, we kind of split it into like a spending, a savings, and then like a giving or charity bucket. And I've actually recently I created a spreadsheet for it. So we used to like literally have these, essentially envelopes or like buckets where the money would like tangibly go into. But now I think, that's becoming kind of antiquated and the girls are growing up and like they're not going to be dealing with their financial lives in terms of actual green pieces of paper, right? So I wound up creating a spreadsheet for them and it's kind of cool. Like I walk them through. So when their savings money goes from like their just regular savings account at like the bank that we have, and then like literally transfer it over to the brokerage, they have a brokerage account, and then it's just almost like, again, for you, who's a spreadsheet person, like just a reallocation of net worth, right? It's not like anything, they still have that same net worth, but then the money's invested. And then obviously it can go up or down from there. So we kind of track that. And it's become this like multi-pronged lesson that I didn't even really anticipate at the outset of this when it was just 3 buckets with some green pieces of paper in it, right? So it's been neat to kind of see the evolution of this. And then I still haven't gone into like, I think it was Doug Nordman from the Military Guide who we had on a couple of years ago, who's talking about like the kid 401k or some combination of the bank of mom and dad and the kid 401k. And it was like, okay, we can incentivize saving by offering different like matches or things like that. So like there are ways to like really up that game. It just depends like how much you want to get into it, how many lessons. It sounds like your daughter probably is similar to mine sometimes. Like, okay, we've done a lot of lessons, like maybe we could just cool it for a little bit. But you never know when, if you offer a 1-to-1 match where, oh, that money in your spending account, hey, maybe we could divert that to saving. And for every dollar you put in, I'll match it with an extra dollar or something, or pick the amount. I'll match it with a quarter. I'll match it with $2, whatever it may be. You can teach them those lessons, which are similar, Kristy, to like a 401k. That's what a 401k match is. Sure, it's part of your salary, I suppose, and it's silly to pass up, but really they're incentivizing behavior that ultimately they want to see. So that's what you're doing with the second generation fire domination, which I just love. Like you can help incentivize and teach through these lessons, like behavior that you want to see and you want to impart in your daughter.
Yep, absolutely. I think those are really good ideas. I haven't done too many solid exercises or activities like that, although I've dabbled and tried and we've just kind of lost interest, or she's rolling her eyes at me or whatever it may be. But I think on a deeper level, like the important thing is just having conversations out loud in front of your kids about what you value or how you think through things to buy, and kind of showing them examples like that about, for me, not trying to keep up with the Joneses, not getting things that are just simply maybe status symbols, for example, or, things like that. Just spending money on things you value and being very intentional about it, rather than just trying to, for her, get the latest Lululemon top or whatever it may be. So
yeah. And that's something I think a lot of people, right, from kids on up could use. I think that's one of the big lessons of FI just generally, that keeping up with the Joneses is a race to nowhere. And it doesn't lead to happiness. It just leads to more of everything, more of that hedonic treadmill. And it certainly doesn't lead anywhere good, at least in my estimation, my strong estimation. But yeah, I think I'm with you in terms of, okay, just normalizing talking about money with your kids. And I even sometimes, like, we're pretty open with them, but like sometimes like, oh, do I talk about our net worth? Do I talk about how much we earn? And I've kind of come down on, yeah, we do. And in our house, that's something that we think is important. And it's still, even though I talk about personal finance all the time, it wasn't like natural. I still find myself hesitating. But then I realized, like, what am I hesitating for? These are my children. And like my goal in life at this point is for them to have better lives and successful lives. And I think this is important enough that I'm spending so many hours a week trying to teach and help people all over the world. Like teaching my kids is pretty important, right? So yeah, that's something I think a lot of us could take away. I think hopefully for everybody listening, it's like, hey, just start thinking about like those little steps. You mentioned 1% better before. Like start thinking about those little ways. Like maybe you're uncomfortable. Like you're not going to go to your kid tomorrow and say, hey, I make $78,500 in my salary and my net worth is X. Like maybe that's the weird kind of first step. But what if you start talking about just little things? I suspect your kids are interested in how much life costs, what the electric bill is. Like they might not even know that there is an electric bill. No joke. Like that's very probable, highly probable, that they have no idea you pay for water and gas and electric every month, or what a mortgage is, or that when you say you own your home, you actually own 17.22% of it. And every time you pay a mortgage payment over those 360 months, you own a little bit extra. And like, I suspect that would be kind of neat. And you just kind of test the waters of, you get some feedback from your kid. Obviously, you see if they're interested, or like you said, kind of rolling their eyes sometimes. And it goes back and forth. I think that's the other thing. And like, sometimes you get roll the eyes. Sometimes you get, hey, this is super cool. And you just play it by ear, and you don't get turned off or just say, oh, they're rolling their eyes. They're always going to roll their eyes. I think it's like, you got to try a couple times,
Yep, definitely. They're always listening. And even if you don't think they're absorbing it, they are. There's some percentage of that that's getting through to them.
Yeah.
And I think one thing also for me, talking about, money and career and life with her more and more as she gets a little bit older, they did recently in class one of those exercises where they're trying to figure out what career would be good for them in the future. And I've kind of shifted from a conversation around like, oh, you can get so many scholarships for college and we can figure out how to have you go to college for a relatively decent amount of money rather than, breaking the bank, things like that. I've actually shifted that conversation to trying to talk to her about really pay attention to what you enjoy in life and try to seek that out in whatever next steps of life you take. And maybe even it doesn't have to be college, you I want her to have the option of being entrepreneurial where, that was kind of never in the picture for me. It was very much follow this linear path, go to college, get a job, go to grad school. So I want her to be able to think outside the box a little more and show her that there are other options.
Yeah, I hear you. And, I know it just jumped to mind. The Rob Phelan's, the simple startup would be maybe something, just generally that's something we have talked about over the years. Rob's amazing book, and he has like a couple time a year, actually like cohort based group where they actually run people through building like small scale businesses, which is super cool. So for anybody out there, we haven't talked about it. I haven't mentioned that in a while, but yeah, it's thesimplestartup.com. And I know my daughter Molly loved the book, just absolutely loved the book. And a lot of kids all across the country and world, I guess, are kind of like building businesses and learning those skills. So it's like, okay, how can we set our kids up for second generation fire domination? Like starting these little lessons. Like I think that to me is the big takeaway. It's like, okay, I know what I wish I had learned when I was 12, 13, 15, whatever it is. Like, how can I pass that along in a not overbearing manner? Right. And I think like those little normalizing talk about personal finance, teaching them about investing, again, for me, investing is real simple. It's just low cost, broad-based index funds. It's not like I'm sitting there, teaching them necessarily about like what Brian Feraldi taught us both in episode 314 with you. It's like price to earnings ratio and all that stuff. Like that can be the next lesson, right? And it's like, okay, you're actually buying parts of businesses. That's where I go next. And we can get into PE ratio eventually, right? But like do that. And then entrepreneurship, like we're going to hopefully connect you with Alan Donegan. Like I didn't learn entrepreneurship at 12, 13. I wish that I did, even if I didn't start a world-changing business or anything that made me $1 even. Like, but if I had those skills and I didn't start learning them, and because for me, like I said before, is that this is a 15-year journey. That's starting in my late 20s in terms of entrepreneurship. What if I had started learning those lessons at 12? That's where something like the Simple Startup comes in. It's just like really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, Kristy, thank you so very much for coming back on the show. Really appreciate it. It was amazing to catch up with you. It's extraordinary to see what has changed in your life in really about a year and a half since we last spoke to you. So huge congrats on the engagement. Huge congrats on the new job. And you and I are both going to keep in touch on this second generation fire. And yeah, it's great. I just love hearing the update, love hearing what you're up to. And I think this is really helpful. Hopefully it's helpful for you. And I know it's helpful for the audience because we're all living our lives. And there are certainly many, many people out there who can see themselves in your story. So thank you so much for coming back.
Yes. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah. So 2 quick things at the end. If you're out there and you have FI wedding tips, again, choosefy.com/subscribe, get on the newsletter, hit reply to any of the Tuesday emails, pass them along, say, hey, this is for Kristy, and I'll send them her way. And maybe, and this is probably the most logical thing, is we will have a follow-up episode. Maybe we'll just even do a little segment, Kristy, of if there are specific tips. And then after the wedding, we'll talk through, if you're up for it, like things that you did, things that you wish, whatever it may be. And I think that would be really helpful because I've gotten dozens of emails about weddings specifically, and it's just not something that I have any expertise on, unfortunately, since I got married so long ago. But yeah, so that will be great. And then the other thing that we said, just to close the loop on, is definitely we'll connect you with Alan Donegan. So hopefully the next episode that you come on will be just kind of a little brainstorming mastermind session between you and Alan, if you're up for it.
That sounds fantastic. I would love that.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, thank you. Until next time.
Thanks, Brad.